Hello and welcome everybody to today's book review. It's been a couple of weeks since we've done one. We apologize for that. Last week we were working on our top 10 deliverance ministers video, and that was a big project. And the week before that we had the Piercing the Darkness conference. But this week we are back with another Bob Larson book. This week we are going to be reviewing Jezebel Defeating Your Number One Enemy by Bob Larson. So, this was published in 2015. It's one of Bob Larson's most recent books. And it's basically a synopsis on the spirit of Jezebel. Now, according to Bob Larson, this is the most common spirit that he deals with in people. And I wouldn't feel confident saying that it's necessarily the most common spirit I've seen in people, but it definitely is very common. It seems like pretty much everybody, man and woman, has some degree of a Jezebel spirit in them that I've worked with so far. So it definitely is very common, and it makes sense that he's writing a book on it. It's also one of the spirits that everybody talks about and everybody names. Gets a little bit more attention than it probably deserves, but it's a very well-known name as far as demons go. So the synopsis of Jezebel is basically Bob is going through the story of Elijah and the confrontation on Mount Carmel, and the response of Jezebel, and the life of the biblical figure of Queen Jezebel, and taking that and dissecting it to the point where we can pull out certain scriptural truths from it, and then after that commentary, basically coming to some conclusions about the spirit of Jezebel from his experience and what the spirit of Jezebel does in churches and in Christians and how it affects us today. The pros would be that this book would help us have an understanding of where the spirit of Jezebel lies in the structure of the demonic kingdom. It gives us a good understanding that this is a major spirit, but that there are definitely stronger spirits behind it. It is a front man, so to speak. It's something that the devil often puts out in the front, and is not usually the primary spirit operating behind a person or a group, but is usually a dominant factor. Second thing is this book gives us a pretty balanced understanding of what the spirit of Jezebel is, because most Pentecostal people who throw this word around, they really have no idea what a spirit of Jezebel is. A spirit of Jezebel is a spirit of control and manipulation, and it will use witchcraft, it will use sex, it will use lust, it will use false religion. It is not primarily any one of those things. Those are all tools for control and manipulation. So it is primarily a control spirit, and a specific type of control spirit. And finally, one of the best parts of this book that I read was Bob gives a little bit of a breakdown of how the spirit of Jezebel infiltrates the church, and in what areas of ministry the spirit of Jezebel will try to corrupt. And this is really interesting. The first area is the prophetic, and that's absolutely true. Jezebel often comes into the prophetic where there's a big prophetic ministry and there's no deliverance or there's no good teaching. It's usually got Jezebel all over it. The second area that Jezebel usually corrupts, Bob Larson points out, is the areas of healing and deliverance. And I would also agree with that. Basically, Bob says here, and it's on page 125, Jezebel's agenda is simple when it comes to the miraculous, counterfeit, corrupt, and co-op. This is especially true in the area of deliverance, and this is absolutely the case. And one of the interesting things that I've seen this in action is that Bob says Jezebel will try to counterfeit the process of deliverance by inspiring Jezebel-dominated individuals to claim the ability to cast out demons better and faster than others. And there's a particular individual who I know was definitely a highly demonized, quote-unquote Christian minister, but he was really an apostate, and he was consistently making the claims that he could cast out demons more effectively, better, faster than everyone else. And that's pretty much the case. Where a Jezebel person will come into deliverance, if they come in at all, they are going to try to be the deliverance person and get a tight knit on everything. And pretty much this is what happens when Jezebel invades a church, is that the Jezebelian individual will get their hands on everything they can control. And I would add to that one of the first targets that Jezebel will come after is the intercessory prayer of a church. And then in addition to that, it will come after the prophetic. It will come after deliverance and it will come after preaching and teaching. And those are the areas it's going to try to corrupt. So whatever area it can get into, the Jezebel-inspired individual is going to try to gain a position of control, gain a position where they have some sort of influence, and then use that influence knowingly or unknowingly to corrupt that ministry for the Spirit's purpose. A couple of drawbacks from this book, not much, but just when I've compared this with other teachings on Jezebel, like John Paul Jackson's book or some short excerpts from Win Worley's book, they seem to have packed a lot more dynamite into a lot less space. And this is a 150, 200-page book, and there was really good stuff in it, but there was some times where I just had the feeling, well, I don't know, I'm not drawing a lot from this. But overall, it was still good, just maybe not as much dynamite as some other teachings on Jezebel. And honestly, out of the 5 Bob Larson books that I've read, and the 4 previous ones we've reviewed, this is probably my least favorite, or the one that I got the least out of. But that doesn't mean it was bad. It just wasn't as impactful for me as some of Larson's other books. So, overall, I would give this book a 7 out of 10. And I would recommend this for some people who are interested in learning more about the Jezebel spirit, especially if you're in ministry and you're curious and you're wondering, are we experiencing a Jezebelian incursion? Is the spirit of Jezebel sending people into our church or our ministry to corrupt it? If you're seeing some red flags and you're curious, along with Jackson's book, this would probably be a good read, and it would help shed some light on the spirit of Jezebel and how to deal with it in deliverance and in church polity. Well, thank you for watching today's video. If you have read this book, let me know what you think, if you learned anything from it. And if you're interested in reading it, let me know in the comments down below. Anyways, we hope to see you next week. And until then, God bless you in Jesus' name.